Hi there, and welcome to this Hall of Tyrannus podcast, which has been brought to you by the Tree of Life Foundation. My name is Johan, and I'm your podcast host. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing and chatting to Johan. For those of you that do not know Johan, he started his career as a pharmacist in 1991 in California, USA, but he quickly became a turnaround specialist and has since been the CEO of a myriad listed and unlisted companies. And in 2007, he started the Tree of Life Foundation. It's a charitable endowment fund that's also an investor, a private equity investor, via Sard Investment Holdings, which is a wholly owned investment arm that invests in private businesses that are cash generative and capital light. Johan, it's a privilege to have you on our podcast today. So thank you for your time and welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So, as we all know, we're sitting in the midst of a COVID-19 pandemic globally and locally. And in South Africa, along with half of the rest of the world, we're sitting in a lockdown in our homes. So, my first question is just on a personal level to you. How are you doing amidst everything that's going on in the macro front and amidst the lockdown?
Actually, better than I thought. At a personal level, all is good, and it's great to spend time working from home. I do miss the exercising, though. I'm not a fitness fanatic by any stretch of the imagination, but I do like the one or two runs or cycling I get in a week. And at my age, you quickly notice it around your belly when you don't have those. So I miss that. Spiritually, it's a special time. There's a reduction in the general noise levels around one. So I do think we have a unique opportunity to tune in and listen better in this time. And then professionally, I think all of us in business are linked to the economy. So professionally, I think one is concerned about what's going on in the world and in the economy. I think in South Africa, we simply don't have enough ventilators for all the businesses that will show up at the emergency room in the coming months.
Thanks, Johan. I agree with you on that last point, and we're going to delve into that just now. On a physical or fitness level, just to make you feel better, you even see the effects of lockdown around your belly as a person in your mid-30s, so you don't have to feel bad about what you see, because I see the same developing. So we are in lockdown, and many of us went into lockdown seeing only the negative side of it, but I'm interested 2.5 weeks into lockdown, actually 3 weeks into lockdown. What are some of the unexpected wins that you've unlocked during lockdown? Are there any unexpected wins for you? It could be spiritually, personally, professionally, and maybe as a follow-up to that, what does sharpening the saw look like for you in a lockdown season?
Yeah, I think at a work level, I'm actually someone that struggles to do deep work during office hours. I get distracted a lot and easily, and so I end up doing that at nights and over weekends. And I find it a lot easier to do that type of work where you actually need to do quite a bit of new thinking and dream up new ways of doing things. I find it easier to do that during the day now, which is great. At a very trivial level, once the time management is a lot easier. Or actually, I should say you gain a lot of time that you don't normally have. Just the time that you would normally take to prepare for work, to travel to work, to go to meet. I mean, we're in a private equity space, and we typically travel to our investee companies for meetings. I mean, we're investing in them, not the other way around, and we're there to support them. So we'll typically go to their offices for meetings, and you save all the travel time associated with that. So generally, the office, we have a silly rule at the office as well, where the last person to leave must switch on the dishwasher and the first person arriving in the morning must unpack it. Now, I'm typically the first one to arrive in the morning, so I save that unpacking exercise as well. So altogether, just a better use of time. Your point about sharpening the saw is very relevant. I do think that this is a great opportunity for doing just that. Franz Struwig, a friend of ours, introduced us at SAR to the term technical debt some time back. They use it in my layman's version to refer to some inefficiencies that you build up when you develop a software program over an extensive period. Some shortcuts that you use along the way, quick fixes, and then over time, there seems to be a bit of a compounding effect of all of these, and you never quite have the time to go back and fix all these little things, annoying things that there are. And I think we build up some technical debt, or call it operational debt or whatever, in your life as well, in the way that we do our work, whether it's the way that you're managing your contacts in Outlook, or whether it's the way that you're sorting your documents in Dropbox. I think that is a very practical side of sharpening the saw. But then on the other side, I think for me, sharpening the saw this time doesn't mean to do more of what I normally do, but wish I could spend more time on, like let's say cycling, but it's rather to do things that I neglect to do normally. So go a little bit deeper down my prayer list. Normally I run out of time allocated for prayer before I've gotten to the bottom part of the list. And so you eat the normal stuff, family and work and all of that. Think about context more and less about solutions.
Thanks, Johan. Those are some good insights. And I especially love the analogy you made referring to technical debt. I think there's a lot of admin debt and operational debt, whatever you'd like to call it, that I can also quickly bring to mind on my side, which this is a great time to clean out the house, clean out the desk, metaphorically or literally. And yeah, I do think that the knee-jerk reaction is also to do more of what you're already doing. So it's a nice reminder for all of us that it's not necessarily doing more of what you're already doing, but doing something different, and or doing something that you've neglected or come to neglect in your normal daily routine, or just do not have enough time for. So I think that's some very nice life hacks for all of us listening. So thank you for that. Now, you've been a CEO of many companies, listed and unlisted. You've been in many turnaround scenarios where you've had to deal with stressful events. I think a turnaround is by definition a stressful, life-altering event for everyone involved. Whether you a retrenched employee, whether you the CEO managing through it, I think it's definitely an event where the normal status quo falls out the window. And I think where we currently find ourselves in maybe a one in a century type event, once in a lifetime for sure type event, where there's lots of unknowns and lots of stresses in the micro environment and the macro environment. I think a lot of that turnaround experience is quite valuable for a time such as this. So I'm interested to know, as someone that's been intricately involved in turnarounds and someone that has managed successfully through them, what do you think from a business commercial perspective are the 2 or 3 levers, could be more, could be less, that a business person, whether you one of the execs in the C-suite of your company or whether you're a founder and an entrepreneur, should be focusing on for your business and for your team at this point in time?
Yeah, that's a great question and not an easy one to answer. But if you think about a business, there's a lot of similarities between a business and the situation that the world finds itself in, or even a country may find itself in. So to make that practical, I mean, in a business, you have to balance the health of your balance sheet and your income statement on the one hand, and the health of your employees and your customers and everyone on the other hand. So if you're willing to exploit customers, you can make a lot more profit. And there are many trade-offs that you have to juggle. Right now, we're in a situation where the balancing act is between the health of the economy and the health of the population. And that trade-off is a difficult one to juggle. Back to the business level, you know, oftentimes in turnarounds, you have to think about whether it is warranted to actually have some retrenchments or not. And that's a very tough decision because you're affecting the lives of people. On the other hand, if there is no company left at the end of the day, then there are no people that will benefit from it, and not customers and not employees either. So that tension is a real tension. I think at a practical level, for someone that finds him or herself in that position where the biggest part of this burden of making the decision is resting upon them, I think one must distinguish between the balls that you can juggle and those that you can't. Firstly, because there's just some things that you cannot do much about. So you can try and juggle it or change it as much as you want to change it, but you're not going to change the way that the JSE react. So, it doesn't make sense to try and juggle balls that are not under your control. And then even if you have all the ones that you can juggle, let's say there's 20 of them, you may only practically be able to juggle 3, 4, or 5, depending on your skill level and your personality type. And it's not whether you're going to drop some balls or whether things are going to go wrong. Both of those will definitely happen. It's just whether you've picked the right balls to keep in the air, and how successful you've been at that. So I think turnaround situation is always a back to basics type of exercise, where you really have to distinguish between the things that are really important. And that's probably the most vital exercise that we're all going through in this process.
So maybe it's an unfair question because industries differ and businesses differ. But in this time, when you speak about back to basics and you think about generically speaking about 2 or 3 balls, so when it comes to people, when it comes to cash flow management, are there certain things that a business owner or a C-suite individual in a big company or small company should maybe consider as the 2 or 3 balls that they should focus on? And how do you juggle balls like that?
Yeah, I think definitely there are some generic ones that will translate differently in different environments. But I mean, this is a great time for leadership, right? I mean, if you have that inclination and ability to lead, there is something energizing about a situation like this. It's just that it awakens something inside of you that says, but, now I can use this skill even better. So I think it's very important to be intentional about how we lead in this time, and to lead with courage, not based on false expectations or not based on ignorance, but on an inner strength and courage. You need to focus on the stuff that will not change. I mean, in a company, you can never guarantee people that the strategy will not change, because strategy is dynamic depending on the circumstances and disruptive actions in the market. But hopefully your why, the reason why you started the business, and the how you do it in terms of culture, your basic values, those will typically not have to change. And those are the things to latch onto in you leading this company through this, is reminding people that our strategy may change, the things that we need to do may change, but the why we are here and the how we're going to behave will not change. So the next thing on the back of that is that communication becomes critically important. The old saying of communicating 10 times more than you think is necessary in times of turbulence is important and very relevant. And then lastly, maybe I'll just add, at a very practical level, situations like this typically translates into a scarcity of cash. And one just needs to manage that as best as possible. Cash is the oxygen of a business, and you cannot survive without oxygen, but you need to try and make sure that you have enough to get you through the storm, so that you're one of the players that's still breathing on the other side of it. And that will, more often than not, be determined by your ability to manage and your ability to access cash.
I think that point about oxygen and cash being the oxygen for business is also another vivid analogy and reminder of the fact that you do need to think about each and every penny more than you would in a normal circumstance in a season such as this. That old adage about the pennies adding up becomes quite critical and real in a time such as this. And I love the fact or the idea of focusing your employees and your business on the things that do not change your why and your how, and reinforcing those in a time such as this, and helping them to understand that the what and the strategy in the short, medium, and long term may change. But if you remind them by that 10x communication factor, as you mentioned, that certain things will stay the same and do not change and can actually be reinforced, I do think it does create quite a safe space for a team, for employees to actually become more productive and efficacious in a season that on the outside looks quite tense and pressured. So thank you for those insights. The next question is also an unfair one. I think it seems to be the theme of my questioning thus far, but I'm going to put it out there. I read an article recently about COVID-19. I read about the fact that it could be seen as, it could be a blizzard. It could be a few weeks of disruption. It could be a winter, a few months of disruption, or it could be a little ice age where you have a 12 to 24 month disruption in the economy and in people's lives globally and locally as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So with that as a background, I'd like to ask you just and I won't keep you to it, just your sense about the type of recovery that you think we're looking at locally, specifically in South Africa. You can also speak about globally. Will it be, for example, a V-shaped recovery? Will we jump right back to business as normal after this? Will it be more of a U-shaped recovery where it will take time, whether it's a winter or mini ice age, and we'll come back better on the other end? Or do you think this is a drop and a flat line as in the final act?
Yeah, that is indeed a difficult question. And I think we're going to find in the months to come, even weeks to come, that our answer to that will change. I think with today's insight, it's way worse than one would have anticipated a few weeks ago. It's definitely not a V. I think there's a bit of hope for a U, but I do think that we're going to see an extensive flat line. Let me just say, in terms of South Africa, if you were optimistic, and I'm certainly one of those, we were in a 5 to 7 year U shape before any of this. I mean, we were coming out of a decade of corruption and financial mismanagement, where we lost our competitive edge in a number of key industries, our economy under pressure. So I think we all basically realize in retrospect just how close we came to being a failed state. And as we learned about things that happened that we weren't even aware of. So if you take that as a country and say that we were before COVID-19 in a 5 to 7 year U-shape, and I was convinced that it would be a U-shape because of the type of leadership changes that we've seen, the democracy maturing in the country during the process, starting to talk about economic issues and not just issues on cheap politics and race issues and the likes. Then I certainly saw a U-shape. But now you overlay COVID-19 on top of this, and at least for us in South Africa, that the first thing, if you remain optimistic, is that it has to widen the U. And hence I do think the outlook for us is not that we'll see recovery on the short or medium term, and that we'll really hope to be in a better position, let's say 5 to 7 years from now, if not longer.
Thanks, Johan. It does help to get some insight from you as to your gut feel around it. And speaking to leaders that have been in commercial environments during previous recessionary periods and or major events such as the 2008-9 global recession, it just helps to get some insight. So from what I hear, there's some optimism about a recovery, albeit a U-shaped recovery, and it could be a medium to long-term recovery and definitely not a short-term recovery. So as a business owner, if I hear that, I definitely think that stuff you said about the scarcity of cash, cash being oxygen, and really being intentional about leading your company through a time such as this that might be a little mini ice age becomes all the more important.
Could maybe just add, Johan, that it is true what I just said about South Africa's situation. There's obviously always a positive side to it as well, and that is that I think the leadership of the country and we're blessed with good leaders, have a unique and better opportunity now to effect change management than they had before COVID-19. In that, I think there's probably wide consensus in the business world and amongst the political leaders as to what we should do as a country to get to that point of recovery. And yet, it's always going to be a challenge to implement that from a political perspective. But I think that the challenge has become more achievable now that everyone realizes that it's desperate times and we need desperate measures. And it may be the time where our president and our minister of finance and the likes can get things done that they wouldn't have been able to get done previously.
Maybe COVID-19 does, as you say, provide them with the medicine externally to be able to implement certain things in South Africa that they would not have been able to implement either now or maybe at all. So that is a silver lining, I think, for sure. As a last question, I'm just thinking about what happens in scenarios such as these. Not that I've been in one as big as this. I think this is a first for all of us. But when you do have an external shock and external pressures, a lot of unknown unknowns, known unknowns, I think the human mentality and the knee-jerk reaction is for people to go in a protectionist mindset. In the SA context, you can probably use the word a lager mentality, where people look inward. They start hoarding, they start balling their hands into fists. But as Christians, we know that we've actually been formed and fashioned for times such as this. This is, in a sense, our time to shine, not our own light, but the light of Jesus Christ inside of us. And it is a time for radical generosity, whether it means sharing of your time, your knowledge, your expertise, or actual cash. And I'm just wondering, as a devout Christian and as someone that is active in the commercial space, how do you remind yourself that this is a great opportunity to live out the hope that is within me, and on a practical level, maintain a heart and mindset of generosity in a time where everyone around you might be only thinking about themselves and harbor a protectionist mindset?
Times like this, the natural reaction is to go into a mode of self-protection and self-preservation. Before I answer that, I have to say that this does feel a little bit different, though, in that there's definitely a different feeling with this event. I think it's the fact that this danger of the virus is so indiscriminate and is not targeting certain people. People may have different risks. My risk may be primarily health, and yours may be primarily economic, or whatever the case may be. But everyone has a risk and everyone's affected by it. So to some extent, we're all in the same boat, and everyone is at the mercy of someone else. The landlord is at the mercy of the tenant that needs to pay. And the tenant is a business owner that's at the mercy of the supplier extending payment terms. And the supplier is at the mercy of the factory supplying the goods, and so on and so on. So I think one soon realizes that you may be in this meeting where someone needs you to be lenient, and you have a choice to make, but you're going to get out of this meeting and go to a next meeting where you need the other person to be lenient. And we can see this playing out. And to me, that is very encouraging. I don't think it's unique in South Africa at all. You see it all over the world happening. And then it does affect you on a practical term. You do ask yourself these practical questions that you referred to. We were having dinner the other night. I said, I wish I could have a haircut right now, but probably my barber, wishes that as well. So I think next time I walk in there for a haircut, I'm going to pay for two, because, it's just fair. He missed out on an opportunity that he didn't have. I didn't die from it. So, I may as well do that. I think it's important to do those practical things, because that is, at every opportunity that you get, that would remind you of that. As Christians, we're supposed to understand this, right? If you look at the parable in Matthew, where it talks about the person who were forgiven everything and then turn around and he doesn't see his way open to forgive someone else, and how disgraceful that would be. So we know what we have been forgiven. We certainly don't have an opportunity to turn around and not show the grace and the mercy on a daily basis. And maybe just to add, a verse that I've been contemplating the last few days as well is is in Proverbs, just for the time such as this, where it says, above all things, guard your heart, for it determines the course of your life. I think it's so important for us to really guard our hearts in this time, to not be sucked in by the situation and the circumstances, because we don't live from the outside in. We live from the inside out, and we know who lives inside of us. And we can focus on that, and on our position, our actions and everything will follow from that.
Thanks, Johan. I absolutely love Proverbs 4, verse 23. It's one of my top 2 or 3 verses in the Bible. And in a time such as this, protecting our heart and guarding it becomes even more important. I love that practical guideline of just reminding ourselves of what we've been forgiven. I think it's such a great reminder. If we do have the knowledge, and if we then also remind ourselves of what we've been forgiven, then living it out practically, paying for 2 haircuts when we next visit our barber, becomes way more natural for us as Christians who live in a different economy and a different realm. Yes, we're here, but we live for a different realm and an everlasting realm. And that knowledge of what I have been forgiven is one of the best ways, I think, practically to live out generosity in a time such as this. So thank you for that reminder and for that tip. I appreciate it. I thank you also for your time. It was fantastic to spend some time with you, to pick your brain and to listen to your insights around the current situation we're in and what you think will happen next. So I appreciate it. Thank you, and all the best for the rest of lockdown.
Right. Appreciate, Johan. It was a great privilege. Thank you.